Hello all, and welcome to the second NAGCAST of 2015. We want to let you know about a few housekeeping items. First, please remain muted throughout the call so the presentation isn't interrupted. At the end of the presentation, there will be a question and answer period. Throughout the call, you may submit questions through your web console. Simply locate the question and answer panel on the right side of your screen, type your question in the open area, and click Send to submit. Now, on to the presentation. Casey Fick, Mosers, will be the moderator for today's webcast. Casey?
Hey there, everybody. Thanks a lot, Liz. Thanks for joining us for today's webcast. We're really looking forward to sharing our information with you. Communication is such a huge deal these days, and it's becoming even more important as busy as people are. So thanks for joining us today. As mentioned, my name is Casey Fick, and I'm going to moderate today's session. I am the communications manager at Mosers. Joining me today for the presentation will be Scott Dingwell, who's director at BlackRock. Scott, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Casey.
And also Carl Steinhilber, who is the National Government Practice Leader for the Retirement Services Division at MassMutual. Carl, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon, everybody.
So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. The PowerPoint presentation for today's webcast has been posted to the NAGDA website. If you want to have a hard copy of the presentation in front of you and have not yet downloaded it, you can access it on the NAGDA homepage at nagda.org and click on the News and Events section located in the middle of the homepage. Also, before we get started, I wanted to thank all of our sponsors. Without these sponsors, NAGDA couldn't offer the 2015 NAGCAST series to participants. Those sponsors include the Siegel Group, Nationwide, ICMARC, VALIC, MassMutual, TIAA-CREFT, and Prudential. Again, we are really grateful for the support of these industry sponsors. And another housekeeping item, today's NAGCAST is worth 1 continuing education credit for INFRI, CRA, CRC, and CPE designees. NAGDA will provide INFRI a list of all participants. If you will be seeking credits, you must have registered with your contact information and be logged into the webcast using your information. Individuals from the same venue that will be seeking credits must all participate separately. NAGCAST participants seeking CPE continuing education credits must complete the polling questions during the webcast to receive credits. And then finally, we really need your input to let us know how we did with this NAGCAST, things that we did well, things that we can improve, so we can make these better in the future for everybody. So at the end, when you exit the webcast, a very quick, easy to answer NAGCAST evaluation will pop up. We ask that you take a couple of minutes to complete the survey so we can determine if we're on the right track with these programs. Again, really valuable for you guys to give us feedback on this. With that being said, I've already introduced today's presenters. Today's agenda, we're going to cover NAGDA's Best Practices Guide section on communications and participant education. If you guys aren't familiar with that publication, you can actually find that out on the NAGDA website. It's underneath the publications drop-down. Again, as I mentioned earlier, communications is a huge deal. So if you haven't checked out this guide, it's a great starting point for you guys to start a communications campaign. But if you already kind of have a strategy going, it's a great refresher too to kind of catch up on the information that you need to be communicating to your participants. So I'm actually going to kick off this presentation by discussing the object of who are you communicating with. And so if I ask that question, obviously you guys are going to say you're communicating with everyone, of course. But the point that I want to make here is that different audiences require different messages via different channels at different times. To make that a little bit more simplistic, you know, someone who's just started their career and is joining your plan is going to have a different mode of communication, something that they prefer versus someone who is perhaps retired and prefers to get their communication a different way. And obviously the messages are going to be different based on your career stage. So again, different audiences require different messages. So it's extremely important that you understand who makes up your participant base. So how do you do that? Understanding the who requires, first and foremost, plan research. I know with our record keeper, we receive a monthly report. Some of you may have ad hoc access to reporting on your participants. but it's really important that you review certain aspects of your participant base. That includes age ranges, gender, contribution amounts or types, participation status, who's eligible, who's active, who's retired, the investment decisions those participants are making inside of the plan, even their beneficiary designation status. All of this data is extremely important for you to understand, and it helps guide your communication decisions. And we would recommend that you review this information at least quarterly, but again, we do it on a monthly basis, and you'd be surprised at how much that can change from month to month. Another way for you to understand who you're communicating with is to survey your participants. So Mosers administers a DB and a defined contribution plan. So Mosers at large conducts an annual communication preferences survey, and that's just to see how people are communicating or how they prefer to be communicated with. And again, you'd be really interested to see how much that's shifted over the last few years. So this really helps us understand who our participants are. And then obviously you've got these other surveys, learning about their investor knowledge, learning about saving and spending habits, and again, post-seminar feedback and call center surveys. This all helps kind of paint a picture of who your participants are, how they like to be communicated with, what they know about saving and investing. A lot of times, not a whole lot. We can make those assumptions, obviously, but it's always great to have that data to back up the decisions that we're making about our communications. And just to back up a little bit, I think I actually passed my prompt. We are conducting polling questions. So one question that I had meant to ask earlier on the previous slide is, what segment of your participant population do you think is the most underserved in terms of communication? Would it be A, new employees, B, mid-career employees, C, employees nearing retirement, or D, retirees? Again, who do you think is the most underserved? I know for our plan, I think that new employees sometimes, they get onboarded into the system and they just start doing their job and they don't get a lot of communication. So that might be who we are most focused on, who gets underserved. It looks like a lot of the group is saying mid-career employees, which is great. So if you haven't had a chance, please fill that out. That's great information for us moving forward. And I'm going to move on. You can go ahead and close that polling question. So once you've kind of understood who you are communicating with and what that participant base looks like, start dissecting the information. And when you start dissecting the information, you can start to see some trends and identify target audiences and craft some messages that align with your plan objectives. And some of the messages that you're going to send out, they're going to appeal to all of your audiences. It's not just going to be one small segment. And that's going to be like the plan level news, the fund information, plan policies and procedures, and account services. Again, you're just going to have general plan level information that everybody's going to need to know. But the more you drill down, some messages you will find will apply to a specific audience. We're talking about those who are eligible. They need to start contributing now, obviously. For those who are participating, they need to contribute more perhaps, or understand their investments. Those who are participating also need a designated beneficiary. That's always a big one for us, is getting folks to understand that they need a beneficiary for their account. And then for those who are nearing retirement, they need to obviously understand to utilize those catch-up provisions, keep assets in the plan at retirement. That's one of our big plan objectives, is getting folks to understand that they can keep their money in the plan when they retire. And then obviously, whenever they do retire, we need to communicate to that segment certain drawdown strategies, how they can handle their investments. RMDs are obviously a big topic for our audience. So again, as you drill down and understand who your participants are, what they know about the plan, their experiences with the plan, you can start to develop a communication strategy to target each of those audiences. And for us, with our plan, the State of Missouri Deferred Compensation Plan, targeted messages serve three major purposes, and I've kind of touched on this already a little bit. But first and foremost, we want to recruit with our targeted messages. So we're going to recruit those who aren't participating in the plan, or perhaps even folks who are auto-enrolled. We do have an auto-enrollment initiative, those who are auto-enrolled but opted out. So we've got this audience of folks who don't participate, who need to be. So first and foremost, it's about recruitment. And then once we actually have them in the plan, our main goal is to reassure and remind that group that's participating. You know, we're talking about the education stuff, the continuing information to let them know, yes, this plan is great. Here's some things that you need to know about it as you continue to contribute. So we just want to continue that on. And then finally, as I mentioned, a big goal of ours is to retain assets in the plan. So that's another segment that our targeted messages like to go out to. So though for us, that's kind of the three-legged stool of the messages. And again, you're going to have messages that will span all three of those groups, actually, when you're communicating these different pieces of your plan. And before I talk a little bit about taking the leap and the next steps and how to use this information, and we transition to Scott and Carl, I'm going to open up the second polling question for the day, which is, after face-to-face interactions, what is your most effective communication channel? Is it emails, printed newsletters and statements, the website, call center, group seminars, videos, or social media? Obviously, you know, all of these have their uses. For us, you know, we're never going to get beyond group training being our, you know, go-to piece of communication and one-on-one consultations. The face-to-face interaction is extremely valuable for our plan. Our participants like it. It helps us get out in the workforce to see these folks and talk to them face-to-face. But, you know, as you all probably know at this point, social media is gaining a lot of traction, and we use that. Emails are also a big thing for us. I'm going to speak just very quickly to some examples of what we've used. Email marketing is something we do. We send out a monthly DC update. So again, this goes out to all of our participants once a month at the beginning of the month, just important plan news. We include a video in that, so we produce a video, and we've produced a number of videos. The silly one that you see on the screen now, which I'll actually talk a little bit more at the annual conference at the end of this month in the targeted communications session. We did a fun video with some dogs, and you'd be surprised, the views on these videos were, in 1 week, over 5,000 views on this series for America Saves Week with our dogs. So video is becoming a very important way to communicate with participants, and we're finding that folks are really watching the videos, and if you make the content interesting, they're actually, you know, picking up the information that you're trying to give them. So they're really working out great for us. Another example of things we've done in the past are direct mail pieces. And this is a targeted piece that actually targeted a department, and we had some success with that. So that's another example. And then we've also, as I mentioned, group seminars, one-on-one consultations, a great way for us to communicate our plan details to participants, and we always get great feedback from them. And we actually conduct them across the state of Missouri. We have 7 education specialists serving specific territories. And again, we get great bang for our buck on those. Other ways we communicate: newsletters, statement messaging, online account messaging, website, and call centers. All of these play an important role in any communication strategy. And with that, I'm going to throw it over to Scott, who is going to talk a little bit about the what of the communication strategy, what you're communicating. Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Casey. I'm personally a big fan of dog videos, so that solution gets my vote. Very seriously, my focus during the next 10 minutes will be all the messages that I think we need to get out to participants. Not all of them, but I think that the key messages. As this first slide indicates, I think we have 3 challenges. First off, as we've mentioned, there's a lot of information that theoretically we could get out to participants. Some of the categories are listed here, but we really have to avoid just shotgunning this information out and hoping that participants figure out what's important. We have to be strategic. We have to find ways to deliver the most relevant information at the right time and make it easy to digest. I think Carl's really going to hit on these ideas. One important strategy to accomplish this objective, something I believe in deeply, is the idea of simplifying messages. We really have to find a way to condense it down into key themes that will really get through to the participant. And then the last point is we need to layer that information. We have to make sure that participants aren't buried in too much information. So I think websites do a great job of this. They structure the message so that you see the simplicity on top, but if you want to dig down, you can do that. So this is really what I want to focus on for the next 10 or so minutes. So I'd like to start off by saying that I think a lot of the messages have really changed over the years, and I hope this doesn't show my age, but I want to highlight some things that I think have really changed as I've been in the 401k business. First of all, when it comes to promoting your entire plan, I've seen a lot of materials over the years that try to position the 401k as an easy way to save a lot of money for retirement. And maybe this is just a matter of semantics, but I agree the 401k is a great vehicle for saving, but I wouldn't call putting away 10% or more per year, maxing out your account, I wouldn't say that's easy. It really requires a commitment. So I think we need to be very clear with participants that it will require some sacrifices along the way, but the payoff in the long run will be worth it. Next, with contributions, we need to send the message that for most participants, they'll need to have annual contributions between themselves and their employer well over 10% per year. So you'll hear me mention this a few times in this webcast. We need to be careful not to simplify that message too much, or not to imply in the message that if you're getting the full match, you're putting in enough money. I'll go into this more in a minute, but I think we have to be very clear with participants that being successful is going to require big contributions. Moving to investments, where I have a lot to say. We have to stop sending the message that success is all about picking the right funds. It's not about funds, it's about having a strategy. And that strategy should have risk as its foundation. So this may be a challenge. Many people just don't quite understand risk. It can be a little complicated, but we have to at least try. We need to get them thinking about managing risk rather than fixating on obtaining the highest returns. I'll go into more detail about this in a few minutes, but we really need to get them focused on managing risk and finding the highest quality management for their money. When it comes to monitoring strategy, we probably sent the wrong message accidentally when we heavily promoted online access. We have to shift the focus away from checking fund performance every day and instead talk about periodically monitoring your account. Instead of obsessing about fund performance, the obsession really should be whether participants are saving enough to meet their goals. That's what you should be going online to do, is seeing how close you are to your goal, whether you have the right strategy. And lastly, I think one message that we have embraced really well is the idea of moving beyond lump sums. Our savings goal should be retirement income, and I think the industry has really adapted this. But we need to find new and better ways to help participants translate their lump sum into regular income. So that's, I think, how the messages have changed. What we need now is a way to bring it all together into an easy-to-digest fashion. And here's my recommendation. Bring them all together under these three banners: contributions, investments, and time. To me, these are the three central components of success. What I like about this convention is that it should help participants focus on what they can control versus aspects of savings that may be important, but which a participant can't do much about. Let's look at the control issue on the next slide. So I think we constantly need to remind participants that the single aspect of savings that they have the most control over, and what will probably be the largest contributor to their success, is their contribution rate. We have to make this message number one. There may be economic trends over their working lives that will impact their ability to save, but no matter what the economy does, we can all make the choice to save more and spend less. So we have to emphasize that as participants having control. We also need to reinforce the message that you can't control investment returns. Boy, I'd love to, but it's not a possibility. We can't control the markets, and it's near impossible to forecast which fund or which market will do the best going forward. This gets back to the point I made earlier, that we need to move the focus from chasing returns to having a long-term strategy. The good news about a long-term strategy is that it doesn't need to take up much time on a weekly or monthly basis. We have control, but we need to exercise that control strategically, probably more on a quarterly or semi-annual basis. Lastly, although we all hope to be in the driver's seat when it comes to deciding when to retire, for many participants, they may have less control than they'd wish. For many of us, health issues may influence retirement timing. I struggle trying to find the right words for other aspects that may dictate your retirement date. Employment trajectory reflects the idea that it may be partially one's employer's decision as to when one retires. So with retirement timing, I think the fairest assessment is to say that we may only have partial control. Bottom line, it's probably a good idea to think about the messages you're transmitting and to remind participants where they have control and where they don't. So my recommendation is that when you allocate messaging shelf space, whether it be on your benefits website, seminars, and materials you prepare, you put more attention on aspects of savings that participants can control versus those where they have less control. With this in mind, it'd be no surprise with what I've said so far is that you allocate the lion's share of messaging to contributions, follow it with investment strategy, and probably time is where I would allocate the least amount of shelf space. So let's go through each one of these now in a little bit more detail. So when it comes to contributions, I think we have to emphasize that this is where we have the most control. There are a lot of really good things that have come out to help with contributions, maximizing contributions. There's a lot to like. I really like the graphs that show, the value of $1 of contributions in your 20s versus waiting until later. I like any education or communications that focus on budgeting, on shifting budget dollars away from daily luxuries like the grande latte towards small but powerful increases in contributions. Establishing and implementing a budget is really, to me, the first step towards being able to maximize contributions. So I wish there were more communications around budgeting. What worries me a bit in this category is how much the industry focuses on the employer match. As much as I value a match, we have to be careful about unintended messages and the anchoring effect, which may occur when participants are told to maximize their match. I guess my recommendation would be to always follow a conversation about maximizing the match with another discussion about going beyond the match if at all possible. We just can't let participants think that maximizing the match is, good enough, that that's the be-all and end-all of contributions. They have to try and go further. And one great plan design feature that I see languishing in plans everywhere is auto-escalation. So many plans have adopted it, but only on an opt-in basis. We need to get participants using it. So we have to start promoting this great feature in all participant communications where we possibly can. So what about investments? I think the conversation should really evolve quickly towards this idea of finding the best manager. This is really what we should be asking ourselves. Where can I get the best management for my 401k plan? In the past, there was only one choice, managing it yourself. But now that most plans have added professionally managed solutions like target date funds and managed accounts, things have changed. If the goal is to find the best resource to manage your 401k, it's rarely going to be the participant. It's not about finding the highest returning funds. It's about putting a portfolio together that delivers the right level of risk. And, I'm the first to tell you that's pretty complicated. Professional managers can do it in, an infinitely better job of it than most of us individuals. Think about the sophisticated engineering within most target date funds. In my eyes, target date fund process and performance should be the new benchmark for participants. Can they do better than a target date fund? I kind of doubt it. It's the rare participant who can keep their portfolio positioned with the right amount of risk as markets zig and zag. Let's look back to last week as a good illustration of that. Target date funds and managed accounts would have held the course. Individuals are emotional. So we have to get this message across that participants should want the best management possible, and the professional options available in their plan are probably going to do it much better than they could on their own. Lastly, I think we should be educating participants about where returns really come from. I think there's a mistaken view that really smart managers can produce high returns no matter what the markets do. Well, if you've been in the industry for long enough, you know that even the best, smartest managers can't turn lousy markets into steady upward market returns. So we've got to get participants to recognize that to a certain extent, we're all subject to market movements, and the goal shouldn't be to try and get lucky, but rather to harness these markets efficiently and at the right level of risk. So what about the third issue, time? Well, too bad we don't have a time machine. I would have loved one that will let me go back and contribute from a much younger age. If we started late, there's nothing we can do about it. The only thing we may have control over is when we stop saving, when we retire. Really, the most important message that I think we have to push is this idea about calculating how much retirement income your account can produce and using that as kind of the way to determine when you can retire. Don't retire until your account can fund your expected lifestyle. The last point on this page is becoming a growing issue for a lot of plans. Casey mentioned it earlier, that the idea that many participants may be better served staying in the plan versus transferring out at retirement. I know this may be a policy issue for many plans, but we need to start thinking about how we can really push this idea to participants. If it is something you want to encourage, we want to make sure that all the materials reflect the idea that participants may be better off staying in the plan than automatically rolling out to another option. So I'd like to end with, two bonus ideas, two bonus messages that I think are really appropriate to get out to participants. First of all, we should be encouraging planning from a much younger age. Most participants start using retirement planning software when they get close to retirement, maybe in their 50s, but it would be so much better if we could get people to use it from a younger age. I mean, retirement planning software is really the best way to learn how contributions impact your success and how setting the right retirement age can influence your success. Well, if we could only get participants in their 20s and 30s to start interacting with the software, I think they would learn a lot better than just throwing words at them. So that's one idea. The other one is automation. I'm such a big fan of encouraging participants to automate their savings. I think we all instinctively like automation in our lives. We talked earlier about how 401ks can make saving easy. As savings vehicles go, they can make the process easier, and especially with auto escalation and professional management, a lot of the day-to-day decision-making disappears and makes the entire process much more efficient. So by all means, encourage your participants to embrace automation. So I'd like to turn the discussion back to Casey after reading these very small disclosures. Casey, back to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott, and I hope everybody quickly read those disclosures. We love those big pages of text. So I wanted to make one little point on Scott's last point there about automation. We've seen a lot of success with our automatic features, which would include target date funds. We do have auto enrollment, as I mentioned earlier, and we've currently seen, we've been doing it for 3 years now. We have a 13% opt-out rate. So 87% approximately are staying auto-enrolled and saving, so great success with that. And we also utilize auto escalation, and it's been great for us. It's not mandatory, it's a voluntary feature, but again, great success, and we'll continue to push the automatic features. So now that we've talked a little bit about the who and the what, I'm going to throw it over to Carl, and he's going to talk about how you're communicating with your participants. Carl, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start this section with another polling question. I think it's the third polling question. So the question is, what is the biggest hurdle your participants have when saving for retirement? Not being engaged with the plan, not being able to contribute more significantly, making poor investment decisions, or failure to appreciate how much they'll need to accumulate in order to retire successfully. So again, take a minute here to answer some of those questions. So the goal of my section here this afternoon is Casey gave some great examples about getting to know your employees and your participants, and also what to communicate to them about. What Casey was really talking about there was he was really talking about creating personas. creating personas for your employees and your participants. And this is really a tool that's used in the marketing and retail world. And so we're going to talk about how we can apply that in a practical way to get your employees to also pay more attention to what you actually want to share with them. The same thing with what Scott talked about. Scott talked about simplifying the messages to help your participants focus. So my goal is, again, to use practical applications and how to use your marketing and your communications to your employees to get them to take the actions that they need to take their next best step towards retirement. So we can see the polls closed here now. Obviously, it's a failure to appreciate how much they need to accumulate successfully. So we're going to address that during this section. So let's talk about what we're facing to begin with. Today, in today's world, there's a lot of benefits that are on your employees and plan participants' minds. Obviously, there's retirement, but there's also health and protection. And we're competing for the dollars from your employees for the different benefits that they need. Now, health coverage is the most important benefit today that's in sort of in front of everybody right now. But we also have to compete with protection, term life or whole life insurance, disability, the different benefits that you provide your employees, and also to try to get them to save for retirement as well. So again, we're stretching that dollar, and of course it's getting tougher and tougher for your employees to stretch that dollar to cover all the benefits they're going to need for themselves and for their families. Now, when you layer on top of that we're not only competing with the benefits, but we're competing with your employees' dollars, especially for a voluntary 457 plan, which is what we're mainly talking about here today. We also have 401A plans, obviously, but for the 457 plans, we're truly competing for their dollars against other marketers that are trying to get their money, quite frankly. Bud Light, Amazon, Coke, and these are firms that have huge marketing budgets and have been doing it for many years. And so they, everywhere you turn, they're advertising, trying to draw your employees' dollars towards their product. In the meantime, you're trying to draw your employees' dollars towards savings for retirement. So in order for us to really compete, we need to compete like we're competing in a consumer marketing world, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here today. Another thing we're facing is your employees receive about 3,000 media messages a day, and that's through TV, print ads, the internet, emails, etc., just throughout the day on an average 3,000 messages. They're only going to pay attention to about 50 or 52 of them, but they're only going to positively remember 4 of those messages. And again, this is obvious from market studies. So they're only going to pay attention to less than 1% of the messages they hear every day. So we have to get them to pay attention to the messages that Casey was talking about and that Scott was talking about. So it's obviously an uphill battle, but we have started down that path in the retirement savings space to get there. So, of course, another issue is the tools we have for all of our employees. If you use a search engine and go out and search on the different tools available, there are over 70 million hits when you do employee benefits tools. So we have, obviously, the tools out there for your employees to use, whether they're presented by your providers or whether you've created them yourselves for your own plans. So it's not a matter of tools and getting their attention to the tools. It's a matter of focusing the message on them specifically. An example I'll give is, for many years in the retirement space, we would send out that annual enrollment postcard. Hey, everybody, enroll in the 457 plan. And it's great. It's an important thing to do. But we would send it to folks that were enrolled as well, because we would send it out broadly to the employee base. So we call this the spray and pay method. And this method actually is not very successful, and it has some consequences that we're going to talk about. So what the industry has started to do, what your providers have started to do, and again, this is a great way for you to partner with your provider and utilize their resources and their tools to get to some of that messaging that Casey was talking about. A lot of providers have gone out and started researching the plan participant base to get messages, because we realized that the way we were communicating, the spray and pray method that we use, wasn't successful. And the feedback that we got overwhelmingly was that it can be summarized in this one statement. It would be good if a company asked me what I wanted to get, At least then, when it came in, I might realize what it was and pay attention to it. I don't even know if I get stuff from my insurance or retirement company right now. Do they all usually send you stuff? Now, one thing you can do to battle this positioning is have the messaging come from you yourself, the plan sponsor. Research has shown that they will pay much more attention to messages and emails that are sponsored or from the plan sponsor themselves. But there is a way also for your providers to take that lift from you and do it themselves. It's just a matter of targeting your employees. So again, this survey is very similar to the surveys that Casey was talking about when he surveys their employees twice a year. This is the same tool that we have been using in the industry to try and gather more information about plan participants. So what we found overall through our research is that the industry has changed, and consumers are no longer want to sort through information that's sent to them. They would much rather have and receive personalized, relevant communications that are based on their behaviors and based on their preferences. And so it's very important, and to go back to that story about the enrollment card, that enrollment card, of course, sending to the person who's already enrolled doesn't do you much good. But on top of that, by sending that card to that person who's already enrolled, you've lost their attention. Because if you send them a card that says, hey, enroll in my plan, and they're already enrolled in the plan, you don't know them. You haven't paid attention to them. And so when you try to send them future information, they have in the back of their mind that, why would I read this? These folks don't know me. So it's really about creating messaging that is relevant, delivering the right message at the right time, through the right channel, how they want to be communicated to, and to the right person. So in other words, if someone wants to be communicated via email and they haven't enrolled in the plan yet, sending them an email about enrolling in the plan. That's really the goal of what we're trying to get to these days with the focusing on the participants. So I want to give you an example of how this can work. Where I'm employed, we took all the information that we gathered on the preferences of the employees, and we created a targeted campaign using personas, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We sent out messages to 350,000 plan participants about saving more in their plan. It was a save campaign about saving more. So these are folks that were already part of the plan. And the response rate we got using targeted messages was almost 5%. That 5% is almost twice or three times the industry average of 1.5% to 2% response rate that you get from similar marketing campaigns when you're trying to get out and send information to participants about taking action. The way we got there was by sending targeted messages specific to them. I'm going to talk about how we did that. But just by using that targeted messaging, we increased the savings from these employees by over $60 million. And we've done that actually over the past 2 or 3 years, and we've increased about $140 million of retirement savings by doing this targeted messaging. And I hear similar stories from my counterparts in the industry as well, the record-keeping counterparts. They're doing the same things and getting the same results. So again, it's something you don't have to do yourselves. You can rely on and count on your plan record keepers to help you with this communication. So again, how it's done is the industry standard, again, was sending out messages to the masses. So what we started to do in the industry is to start to target the messaging. So for example, breaking it down by male and female, and breaking it down by different age brackets, 18 to 34, 35 to 54, 55 plus. But then layering on top of that, the actual next step these participants or employees need to take. So for example, if they haven't signed up, to sign up, or to save more, to allocate, to improve their investment allocation, or even to consolidate or prepare for retirement. We also have targeted whether they prefer to receive the information electronically or through print. By doing all of this, we've been able to create 96 different personas on targeted messaging. And what we do then with those personas is we actually are able to send messages specifically to folks that are, for example, not saving enough. So we'll go through the data that is received, and we'll find folks that may be saving 3%, 4%, or 5% of salary, and send them a message that's targeted them specifically that says, hey, maybe you might want to look at your savings, and using simple language that's clear and precise and targeted to them, maybe you want to save more. But we take it beyond that. It's not just save more. It's targeted at males and females, and it's also targeted at the different age groups and using messaging that's specific to them. And it's also about grabbing their attention and using tools and images and words that resonate with that particular persona. So the goal here is when 4 folks from your governmental entity are sitting around and having lunch together, those 4 folks may have received 4 different messages from the same record keeper or from you, because those 4 folks may be in a different place in their retirement planning stage. In addition, again, they may be older, maybe younger, maybe male or female. And the point is to use messaging that resonates with them specifically. This is not a new thing. This is an idea that has been taken from the retail world. Retailers have been using this for many years. Macy's, for example, Macy's, for their direct mailer brochures that they send out to their customers, they have 250,000 different versions of that direct mailer that they send out. The front page of that direct mailer is geared and tied specifically to what you have purchased recently at Macy's, or maybe what you have had a family experience where they have gathered that information. Another example is local sports stores. I have a local sports store near where I live. I have 3 young children. They play 3 different sports. I've never talked to the sports store, but I have purchased sports equipment there in the past. And every year, my son plays baseball. Every year around March, I'll receive emails from them and mailers from them. And on the cover of that email is a young boy, Little League age, playing baseball. That happens to be the age of my son, and he plays baseball. The same thing for my daughter who plays lacrosse. I'll receive something for lacrosse season that's targeted specifically to her age with an image of a young female playing lacrosse. So again, this isn't a new idea. It's the way we need to compete in order to draw in your employees to taking that next best step and to listening to your messaging. And again, when you do this, the studies have shown now, again, we can get that response rate up to almost 2 or 3 times what we used to get when sending messages to your employees. So again, it's all about creating personas. But the thing now is we need to move beyond gathering just these 96 personas that we've created, or that Casey has created in his mailings that he's doing for the state of Missouri. You want to keep gathering more and more data. You want to store that data. You want to use different information. So, for example, when we already know on our record-keeping platforms, and you have on your systems that the age of the employees, their balance, their gender, their savings rate, but also start to collect other information. Start to collect, hey, they called the call center last week. What did they talk about? Hey, they attended a webinar. Through speaking with them, we've determined that they don't like the postcards. They want direct mail, or they want to be communicated through the internet. They want to be communicated via phone. They want to attend webinars. They like group sessions, but also things like language. What language they'd like to be communicated in. There's more and more plans out there that have a bilingual population, or Hispanic population, or Mandarin Chinese population, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're communicating to these folks the way, again, they want to be communicated to. So what the goal you want to get to is you want to get to the place where they're trusting you. They're trusting the information that you're providing them. So versus that blind postcard, I prefer email. So they receive an email. You send them an email about the fact that they're already invested, but they need to save more. You know something? I like that because they know how much I'm saving, and they're telling me I should save more. I'm starting to trust my provider. I'm starting to trust my employer around this retirement plan, and I'm starting to trust the messaging that I'm receiving about the actions I should probably be taking to improve my retirement outcome. So again, that is really the goal that we want to reach, because eventually you want to get to the point where you're reaching folks in an infinite way through their age groups, their gender, their attitudes, their behavior, their preferences. And again, you can get to this point. Now, a key point to this, and Casey had touched on it earlier, is if you're going to reach out to them, you need to reach out to them the way they want to be communicated to. So you want to be able to reach out to them through your call centers, through one-on-one meetings and group meetings. But again, just because you're having a group meeting, it doesn't have to be a general group meeting. You can send out postcards to a specific group of employees. Let's say you have a group of employees that are under the age of 35 that are 100% allocated in the stable value product. Maybe that's not where they might want to be, and so you can send a communication out to those folks just about allocation and get them in a room and have that discussion in that room that day be about just investment allocation. So that's what this targeted persona, targeted communications gets for you. So again, it's about using data analytics, and it's about using behavioral finance too. If you get a bunch of folks in a room, in a group meeting, that all have similar situations, and you start really focusing the conversation on that situation, it has been shown that you can drive better results from that meeting, more folks taking action to improve their investment allocation if that's the right thing for them to do. You also want to be able to communicate them through social media and through mobile apps. These are tools, again, that are becoming more and more common, more and more used, especially by the younger generations now. We have found an interesting fact that when it comes to social media, when it comes to the web and using electronic communications, there's a barbell. It's the younger generation that are using it, but also the older generations have really bought into using the internet and using mobile applications to really get their information about their plan. So there is this barbell, but there is a gap. We need to educate those mid-term employees about these tools as well, that they can get more out of them. So one last thing I want to leave you with is addressing games for your employees. One of the things you can do to get them more interested in your plan is to use games and sort of fun tools to get them interested. There's things that other providers out there that will do that will show on the website that will help them sort of get interest in targeting when their retirement date is going to be and start thinking about retirement. One example here is it's a fun game. Find out how many Mondays you have, how many Mondays you have before retirement. Start to track it down, and we rolled this out. And we actually had employees. It's kind of funny. Some of our local education folks, when they met with the employees and asked them, how's your profile towards retirement? They say, I have another 75 Mondays left. So again, it's a fun thing for them to do. You can also use aging tools, web aging tools, where folks can, if they have a webcam, they can put their picture on there, and they can use that aging tool. Again, it's about getting them thinking about retirement. It's funny, this tool is actually very important for the younger generations because the younger generations have a hard time seeing themselves in retirement. So you have to get them thinking about retirement, thinking about the fact that it will come, it will happen, and they need to start saving earlier. As Scott had mentioned earlier, I think all of us wish we had a time machine and had wished we had started contributing to our plans a little bit earlier. And so with that, I'm going to throw it back over to Casey, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carl. Really great information there. The persona idea is fantastic. That stuff looked great. So with that, I'm going to let you guys know that you can contact any of us who have spoken today if you have any questions about the information we presented. I want to give another shameless plug for the presentation at the conference coming up at the end of the month. It's the Targeted Communications to Participants session. Scott and myself, along with Barbara Healy from SST Benefits Consulting, will be giving a presentation on targeted communications. And myself, I'll give a little bit more color on some of the experiences we've had with specific projects. Some of the ones I mentioned earlier, you can learn a little bit more about how they came about, what kind of success we experienced with them. Kim Ware from State of California will be moderating that session, so hopefully we can see a lot of you out there at that session, and then we can get to meet you face-to-face. So with that, again, you can contact us at any point. I'm going to throw it back over to Liz, who has an announcement to make.
Thanks, Casey. At this time, I'd like to remind you that you may submit questions through your web console. Simply locate the question and answer panel on the top right-hand side of your screen, type your question in the open area, and click Send to submit. It looks like we've already had one question submitted from the audience. Christopher Glidden asked, are your monthly videos available online for public or only internal for participants?
Yeah, so those are available online for anyone to watch. So if you go to mo deferredcomp.org, we will have those posted. They're called DC Updates. In the right sidebar of the website, there's a little link to our DC Updates. And we post those to YouTube. That's how we upload them to the web. So we have a YouTube channel as well where all of those videos are archived out there. So anyone can watch them. There are 60 plus videos out there. We've been doing it for a few years. So they're a great way. Again, they're a great way for us to communicate. We have a lot of fun with them. Some of them are kind of silly, but we found that the funnier they are, the more people watch them and the more they get out of them. So it's great.
Thanks, Casey. It doesn't look like we have any more questions for today, but please feel free to contact the speakers via their contact information in the webcast, or send an email to me, lfawcett@amrms.com, and I'll pass it along to the speakers. Casey?
All right, thanks a lot. It's getting pretty close to being that time. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating today. And again, we're about a month away from the annual conference. Look forward to seeing everybody out there. So thanks a lot. Take care.